Never have I seen such an arrogant killer. He arrogantly pushed open the door of the company, found the violent collector who was on the phone, and directly shot him in the head. Then he glances disdainfully at the surveillance and struts out of the company. 10 years ago, George and his brother took part in a bank robbery, but were blackballed by a group of mysterious people, and his brother was killed on the spot. George was lucky enough to dodge a bullet, but before he could avenge his brother's death, he was arrested by the police. After spending 10 whole years in prison, George trained himself all the time in order to avenge his brother's death one day. Finally, one day, George is released from prison, and what awaits him will be a bloody revenge. After walking out of the prison gates, George ran 200 kilometers on a wild goose chase. He came to an abandoned parking lot and found a used car, then took out the key hidden under the tire, Saturday on it, and felt out a revolver. He went to a private detective agency, intending to buy information about the group of enemies back then. When the owner sees the money in George's hand, he starts to sit on the money on the grounds that he has a bodyguard who is a fighting champion. However, the bodyguard suddenly saw the tattoo on George's arm.
I know what that is. I know who you are. Brother, I got no beef with you. Can't mess with no ghost.
He was scared shitless and fled. The boss also went out when he saw this and hurriedly brought out the information. After getting the list of vengeful people, George immediately went to the target's home and kicked down the door. The vengeful man was making a video to a girl and was scared silly when he saw George breaking into the house. The old man tries to fight back with scissors, but the next second, he is knocked away by George. George then pulls the trigger again and decisively blows the old man's head off. However, when he just walked out of the old man's house, a killer appeared behind him, raising his gun to make a sneak attack. Just then, a girl comes out of the room and George spots the killer. Under George's firepower, the killer is powerless to fight back. By the time the killer finds a chance to fight back, George is no longer in the hallway. While the killer was still searching, George had already left. This left George a bit puzzled, but all he had in his heart at the moment was the fury of revenge. So he went to a bar that night, targeting none other than Tony, who killed his brother with his own hands. George follows Tony to the restroom, and when Tony sees George, he immediately realizes that there's going to be a bloodbath. They chase the others away, and George locks the door. Tony pulls out a dagger and attacks George, but is defeated by George. Undeterred, Tony comes forward again, but is tackled and stabbed by George. George does not linger and immediately goes for another target. However, as he drives up to his destination, he hears the radio news that Tony is not dead and has been taken to the hospital for resuscitation. Upon hearing this news, George immediately turned around and went to the hospital. Ignoring the doctors who are resuscitating him, he shoots at Tony. The gunshots alerted the police, who immediately chased after George. The two men went all the way to the basement in a gunfight, and after a fierce firefight, the policeman just wanted to probe and check, but it didn't realize that the next second he was held by George with a gun to his head. So the cop had to drop his pistol and kneel on the ground and close his eyes and wait for death. But 3 minutes passed without any movement. When the policeman opened his eyes again, George had long disappeared into the basement. But lad George, how can not imagine this? It is because of this soft hand almost let himself be ruined. George then drove to his next target, not realizing that the killer was coming after him. However, George did not want to kill innocent people, so he just shot out the other side of the tires and then kicked the gas pedal and left. The next morning, George drove to a church. The pastor inside was giving a passionate speech, but the moment George walked in, the pastor suddenly turned white and frowzy in place. Then they came to a lake. The priest kept confessing to George and said that for George's elder brother's death, he was also very sad all these years. Back then, he was desperate. He wanted to rob some money and did not want to harm people's lives. He wanted to stop his companion from killing, but it was one step too late. Seeing George pulling out his revolver, the pastor didn't say anything more, just slowly kneeled in front of George, holding the Bible, and started to sing the song inside. But just when he was about to pull the trigger, George finally went soft, so he just symbolically fired a shot into the sky. George then came to the church again, and now he had avenged his brother's death, killing all the people on the list. At this point, he also completely lost the motivation to live and was going to wait here for the police to arrest him, but he didn't realize that the shadowy killer had come after him again. He held a gun to George's head, but seeing George looking like he was begging for death, the killer instantly felt insulted. He began to remind George that there was one enemy missing from his list, and that was his employer. At that moment, the policeman from the hospital came in from outside the house, and without saying a word, he shot at George. It turned out that the enemy missing from the list was this policeman, and he was the one who injured George from behind. After George was taken care of, the policeman finally didn't have to be afraid. So he immediately called his wife to tell her that he was safe and fantasized about his wonderful retirement life. But suddenly, with a bang, George didn't die again. It turns out that there is a metal plate in his head. The bullet just hit it, so he was lucky to get back to life.